Anyway, I'm beginning with a brief unscientific survey of those in the room right now. You don't have to answer out loud. You can answer to yourself. But how many of us thought about making a New Year's resolution but decided not to do it because we felt that it wouldn't go so well? How many of us made one in our head, but we didn't write it down or tell anybody so we wouldn't have to be held accountable later when we didn't do it? How many of us made one and have already given up or not followed through? I have two pieces of good news. No matter how you answered any of those questions, the first piece of good news is you're not alone. In a recent Pew Research Center survey, 70% of adults opted out of setting any New Year's resolution at all. And those who did make the resolution, only 6% of the participants followed through, while 94% did not. So no matter how you answer that, you're not alone. Here's the second piece of good news, is that I believe there's something in this week's Torah portion that can actually help us all. Well, there are endless websites and books written telling you exactly what you need to succeed in following through on your resolutions or goals. Trust me, I typed it in, and there were endless people trying to tell me how. Most of them centered around making sure to write it down, making a plan with accountability, and breaking it up into small, achievable goals, all of which are important. But there's a piece, I think, that can come before all of this. Before we write it down, necessarily, before we tell somebody or make a plan, how do we approach scary or daunting situations that we might otherwise turn away from or be deterred from following through? Today, we're going to briefly examine and look at occasions when our biblical ancestors approached such situations. And so the Torah portion comes from is called Vayigash, and it is one word, Vayigash Yehuda, which we'll see. And Vayigash means to draw near or approach, with a number of different connotations: coming close to humans, coming close in a sexual sense, drawing close to an inanimate object, or even to approach one another. So, where is the first place that Vayigash actually appears in the Torah? Is in our first source. Genesis 18:23. Abraham came forward, Vayigash Avraham, Vayomer ha'af tispeh tzadik im rasha. So here it is. This is the story right before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, when Abraham argues with God. First person to argue with God. And Abraham says, "Are you going to destroy the righteous with the wicked?" But it doesn't say Vayomer originally. It doesn't just say that Abraham spoke, but before Abraham spoke, what did he have to do? Draw near. Why? First of all, how is it possible to draw near to God? Open your heart, okay. What? Just start talking. Well, then why does it need the Vayigash? Why doesn't it say Vayomer? If every word in the Torah is important, then why does Abraham need to actually draw near? Because it was a confrontation. Because he was saying to God, wait a second. It wasn't just a conversation. It was like, hey, well, no, you're wrong, but hey, I'm challenging you a little bit here. Yeah, a little back and forth. I would argue in our context, all of that there is an element of preparation. You can't just start a conversation. You can't just start a process. You have to prepare. You have to draw near it in the process. Now, Rashi, one of the great, probably the greatest, considered the greatest biblical and Talmudic commentators, comments on this. And I say, if you notice on the sheet, it says with the Gur Aryeh, because as Jews, as you know, we never have enough just to comment, but there's comments on the comments, and then there's comments on the comments on the comments. The Gur Aryeh is one of the people who commented and elucidated, sometimes challenged Rashi years later. And so where it's in the parentheses, as you'll see, is the Gur Aryeh adding on to Rashi. So Rashi says, Vayigash Avraham, on the phrase Vayigash Avraham, Abraham came forward. We find the verb nagash, nun gimel shin, to come near, used in three ways in biblical times, in the biblical sources, according to Rashi. Number one, of coming near to wage war. And he takes this from the book of Samuel. Okay? And it says, so Joab, not Job, but Joab, Vayigash, drew near unto the battle. And then the Gur Aryeh says this is appealing to God's sense of deen, of a sense of justice, that you draw near when you're going to fight for justice, when you're going to really approach and say, something's wrong and I'm going to fix it, which perhaps is what Abraham was doing here. Then Rashi says, of coming near to persuade by entreaty. And we have our verse from this week's Torah portion. And Judah came near, Vayigash, and said, my Lord, speaking, of course, to Joseph, appealing to God's attribute of chesed, loving kindness, or a desire for reconciliation. How many of us have had to put back together relationships that have fallen apart in one way or another? Personal, social, business, loving. That requires a sense of chesed, of love, of compassion. But you have to draw near. You have to make an extra effort to come forth. And the final one that Rashi brings says of coming near to pray. And this is an interesting one. The story of Elijah versus the priests of Baal on Mount Carmel. For those that don't remember, there was the society was challenging Elijah. Are you really, is God really on your side? And they set up this contest, and Elijah has the priests of Baal set up their altars over here, and Elijah's over here, and Elijah says, you know what? God's going to light mine. I don't even need to light mine. And even more than that, why don't you dump water on it? Matter of fact, dump a lot of water, buckets and buckets and buckets of water. And then, of course, the story in the book of Kings says, and Elijah the prophet came near Vayigash, and he said, O Lord God of Abraham, appealing to God's attribute of rachamim, of compassion. When we draw near out of a sense of compassion, because we want to take care of somebody, or we want to ask for something compassionately, there is a drawing near. So I want to look at a few more of these. And by the way, Rashi concludes and says Abraham, in his dealing with God, employed all of these. In Genesis, Jacob drew close to his father, Isaac, who felt him and wondered. This is when he is dressing up like his brother. Of course, Isaac says the voice is the voice of Jacob, yet the hands are the hands of Esau. What would you attribute this drawing near to? How would you define it? This is a drawing near where Jacob is drawing near in trickery. Yet it's Vayigash. Is this, if you were to take the different ideas of Vayigash, how would you define this? Because it's the same word, and by the rabbinic concept of Gezerah Shava, that we can compare two terms of the word appearing in different places, we can learn things about each other. How is Jacob drawing near here? He's tricking his father. Is this a sense of war? Is he appealing towards chesed? I think that there's an element here of all of it. He's praying that things will work. He knows that he might be doing something wrong, but he's trying to do what his mother said. There's an element of drawing near to create something. He's trying to create a situation. We're going to skip one and go down, and it says on Genesis 29:10, and when Jacob saw Rachel, this is when he first saw Rachel, the daughter of his uncle Laban, and the flock of his uncle Laban, Jacob went up, vayigash, and he rolled the stone off the mouth of the well and watered the flock of his uncle. Now, Rashi tells us that Jacob stepped near and rolled the stone as easily as one draws the stopper from the mouth of a bottle. In other words, this was a massive stone that usually required many people to roll it off together, and here he walked up and just rolled the stone off. But he didn't just roll the stone off. It didn't say that he just approached it. There's a different word for approach, but he vayigash. He stepped near to it. He stepped into a situation that required him to put his mind very clearly on something. Turn the page over. And Genesis 44:18 has our verse. And it says, Judah went up to him and said, "Please, my Lord, let your servant appeal to my Lord, and do not be impatient with your servant, who you are the equal of Pharaoh." Vayigash. Now, it could have said, Vayikrav, and he drew near. It could have said just that he said, but it says Vayigash. And I want to bring you two last ideas. At the bottom of the page, it says Bal HaTurim, another of the commentators, actually Yaakov ben Asher, who wrote the Tur, the halachic work. But it says, he makes an interesting statement. If you look at the word Vayigash Elav Yehudah, and you take the last letters, Shin, Vav, and Hey, which I put in purple. It doesn't show 100% as bold as I wanted it to. I should have done red or something. But if you take Shin, Vav, and Hey, the Bal HaTurim says the last letters of the three words make the word, a new word, Shaveh. Judah said to Joseph, "I'm equal to you." Shaveh means equal. I'm equal to you. Just as you are king, I am king. Why on earth? He's standing in front of the second to Pharaoh, who's not king. Pharaoh's king, but he says, "I'm equal to you." Why is it that he would need to be equal according to the Bal HaTurim? When you ask for something massive, if you look weak, you're going to be perceived weakly, and your requests are going to go unanswered. If you think of yourself as strong, as somebody, when you approach, who says, "Yes, I'm approaching from a place of respect, but you are human and I'm appealing to your humanness." If we see each other as humans, whether we are on the receiving end of a request or whether we are requesting, when we move forward in a relationship, if we can see each other as equal, we'll be able to build a relationship based on mutual respect. And so there's an idea that we are all equal because we're all humans made of flesh and blood. The last one is from Chizkuni, and he says, seeing that he could not remove every official surrounding Joseph, as Joseph did later on, he had no choice but to approach him face to face. Judah wanted everybody else gone, but all the Egyptian officials were standing right there, and he approached him in front of them. Sometimes we have to build up the courage to say, I'm not going to find the exact right moment to make that New Year's vow, that New Year's resolution. I'm not going to find the perfect time to propose to somebody. I'm not going to find the perfect time to start a diet or to learn a new subject. There isn't the right time. People say, when I have time, I will study Torah. And the Talmud says, the person who says, when I have time, I will study Torah, will never find the time. There never is the exact right time. And so sometimes you just have to approach the situation, take it on, and say now or never, and I'm doing it. Shabbat Shalom.